Good.
Good. I love the way you dress. You have such a sense of style.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. So, what we could do is, I could just pretend, well, not pretend, actually like do this like an interview. And then if we like
Okay.
it, we can release it. We can cut off this part right now and, or we can just talk, however you like.
Why don't we do the former and see how that goes?
Okay.
What you just said.
Yeah, we'll do that. Okay, absolutely.
Okay.
So yeah.
And I've got a half an hour.
Absolutely. So let's do it. Okay, great. So I'll
Okay.
just start it like as if we were doing like a live show, but it's recorded. So I'll just start it like I do, like this.
Very
Hey everybody, I'm Chef AJ and welcome to Healthy Living. My guest today is Dr. Vera Tarman. She is the author of Food Junkies, The Truth About Food Addiction, one of the best books, if not the best book I've ever read about food addiction. I interviewed her on the live version of my show and people were so interested and had so many questions. I wanted to have her back and ask her a few more. So thanks for talking to me again, Dr. Tarman.
Thank you very much. I forgot to bring the book to show you. Do you want me to run and get it?
You absolutely could. And I'll tell people about the book while you're going to get it. So I actually got the book on Audible because I like to listen to interesting things while I'm doing spinning at the gym. It makes the time go a lot faster. And it was an incredible book, not only about food addiction from the perspective of somebody that treats patients with it. Dr. Tarman is a medical doctor, but it also had her story as well, which I think just to hear that is worth the price of the book. So I really encourage you to either get it or to listen to it on Audible, like I did twice. So we had a lot of people writing me and asking questions because when I interviewed you, that was the first time we met. I really did not know anything about you except for what I listened to in your book. And so, I know you're somebody that has recovered from food addiction, that is helping people do it. But we didn't even get into the treatment program that you run in Canada. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about that because one of the people kept saying is, well, what is the treatment? What does she recommend? Because some of them, I don't know how much you know about me, Dr. Tarman, but I'm a vegan. I've been an ethical vegan for over 40 years. And I've been able, I feel, to successfully reverse or overcome or manage my food addiction with a plant-based diet. But so many of the experts in food addiction, actually you're the first one that's actually a medical doctor though, say, well, you can't be a vegan and overcome food addiction because animal protein is superior and without it, you can't, and you can't have starch. And my experience is, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. John McDougall, but I follow a starch-based diet. I eat potatoes, I eat rice, I eat beans, I eat fruit. I don't weigh and measure my food, but I eat in accordance with something that's called calorie density, which was not developed by Dr. Rolls at Penn State, but very much she did a lot of research in that. And I don't eat the high-fat foods, mainly because for me they're addictive. I can't stop once I eat oil and salt and, of course, sugar and flour. And it's worked for me and it's worked for thousands of others. So people want to know what's your approach? Is your approach more flexible? Do you believe that the treatment to overcome food addiction is a one-size-fits-all? Is it a one-size-fits-most? Must we paint everyone with the same brush? Or is it more like, if it works, keep doing it? So I'll let you take it away.
Okay, so that's a lot of questions.
Yeah, thank you. I'm sorry.
So there's a couple of things that you said. First of all, in terms of the vegan approach, I think it's, when people say I eat vegan, there's an assumption, I guess it's a moral assumption that that's a better food plan. And I think that you can eat vegan healthy or you can eat vegan extremely unhealthy. And when people take more of the moral approach, I don't know if they're watching the healthy approach. And so just to say that you're vegan, I'm not going to applaud a person for that because I want to know what they're eating when they're eating vegan. To just eat potatoes and potato chips, that's not healthy. So I think it's possible to eat well vegan style. It may be a little harder to do because you have to find the proteins that are substantial enough and that are also not addictive. So I'm not against it. But I'm not immediately like, wow, that's great.
Right.
My next question is, what are you eating? Because I realize you're not going to eat ice cream because of the milk, but there's
Right.
so much other crap that you can eat and call it.
Absolutely. And I was the first 26 years I was an obese junk food vegan. And then but now my diet is whole
Yeah,
plants, it's fruits,
yeah,
it's vegetables, it's winter squashes like kabocha squash and things like that. So
yeah.
I'm eating what I think is a very healthy diet.
Exactly. So on that account, I would say that that's great. So that's good. Now, the second thing is one size fits all versus the multiple approach. In the program that we are doing in Canada at a place called Renaissance, first of all, it's an addiction center. So our focus is addiction, and the food plan is only the first thing. So, with any kind of addiction, you put down your substance. That's the first thing. And now you have to figure out how you're going to live your life happily, not in a state of deprivation. So we do far more than just the food. That's just the first thing, but it's the essential first thing. We don't believe that you can figure out your psychological problems and then stop eating. We believe if it's a drug, it's affecting your mental state, and therefore you can't do those psychological issues.
I so agree with you, because I see people say, well, I have to go to therapy for 10 years and figure this out. Yeah, maybe, but first you got to, like you say, if you're an alcoholic, first you got to stop drinking, right?
Exactly, because your whole frontal, everything is impaired. And if you don't think it's impaired in the same way as alcohol or another drug, then you're not buying the concept of food addiction, because we're saying it's not just that food is addictive, but it is also causing addictive ways of thinking, which are, the bargaining, the all the other stuff. And we have to, deal with that first. And then in terms of the food plan, because by the time we see people at Renaissance, it's inpatient. Like, you're signing away 4 weeks of your life.
Wow.
You're not going to be, shopping for a book that you might try on. You're probably at an end stage or pretty serious stage. And so the food plan that we're offering is mainly probably more for the end stage addiction. I do think it's possible to, if you're doing an outpatient, like with a counselor or something like you, where you're working and you're living your life outside of that, you might be able to do a more pick and choose and figure. First of all, we know it has to be sugar, we know it has to be flour, we know it has to be some things, and then after that, you have the luxury of figuring it out. Because you might not be on that continuum that we talked about. Right. You might not be at the middle to later end. You may be able to moderate some things that an end-stage food addict can't do. Like, I believe that some people can't eat grains like oatmeal.
No, and I believe you too. I see that too, and even within the grains, I see people that maybe can't eat rolled oats, but maybe they can eat millet. The grains vary. Or I've seen people, they couldn't eat rice, but they could eat teff. So, more of the ancient grains. So that's why I think there's got to be a little bit of self-testing. Maybe not if you're end stage, but somebody that is maybe lower on the continuum of vulnerability, that maybe doesn't have a lot of weight to lose. They might have the luxury of experimenting.
Yeah. So with us, because we're assuming the person's at the later stage, we're already starting from a later stage. So we're saying no sugar, no flour, and even no grains. And as I said in the last talk, my experience is that a lot of women, when they hit menopause, find that grains become a problem when they weren't before.
Yeah.
So we sort of start that way, get the person good, and then the theory is, it's not been a program that's long enough to see long-term success yet, and in terms of what do we do once the person is left. But it's possible with the guidance of a coach or a sponsor or a therapist or somebody, not just you, because the idea with addiction is you can't make your own decisions. You have to do it with somebody else, because your rationale could be addictive thinking, and you're not going to see it until later. So you may be able to, with somebody else, say, okay, let's try and introduce grains or dairy or nuts or something like that. And if you have an implicit, like you, when you talk about nuts, I saw your reaction. I know I would never suggest nuts to you, because it's addictive for you.
For me,
but you might not be so sure about something else, and then we could try that. So I think that, yes, it isn't a one size fits all, but there are some universals.
Right, and I believe that, at least from what I understand, talking to people in your world, is that sugar, flour, and alcohol are at least the three non-negotiables.
Yes, that's right, and alcohol for sure.
Yeah.
So that's the other one, is people will say, well, alcohol is not my problem.
Right.
What is alcohol and what is sugar? Sugar, alcohol is just fermented sugar.
Absolutely.
And it really, from the brain, even from the liver point of view, it's not a lot of difference. The difference is that alcohol you can consume a lot more quickly because you're drinking it.
Mm-hmm.
Than sugar, where you actually have to chew and munch it, and the rest of it takes a little longer. However, the net effect is that it will have the same kind of toxicity on the brain and on the liver.
And the fact that alcohol is absorbed even more quickly is probably why you said in your book that people that have had gastric bypass often become alcoholics when they weren't before.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. It's interesting, and you probably see this too, because you already mentioned how addicts like to bargain. I was doing a consult today with somebody, and I call my program Ultimate Weight Loss because really, I wanted to call it Food Addiction Reversal and Treatment, but the acronym would have been FART, and I didn't want to have a FART program. But the reality is my program is, as far as I know, the only plant-based program that addresses food addiction. And so a lot of people come just for weight loss. They don't know what they're getting into, and then they'll do this thing, they'll lose the weight. They say, but as soon as I lose my weight, I'm going to go back to eating sugar and flour. And I'm like, be my guest. You're going to get the weight right back on, because they're so reticent to acknowledge this addictive thing about. And that's what I love about you, is you're really the only medical doctor, the only MD that I've ever talked to that really understands food addiction, that was a food addict, and that treats it. So we can't go to you though, right? Because you're in Canada. We can't. You can't treat the people in the United States, and I'm imagining they probably couldn't even go to your center, right? Because
no, at this point, no, and it's all got to do with liability and insurance and all the rest of it. But there are people who are working in the field in the U.S. Not MDs, but there are people, like yourself, and then there's a few others that are even in treatment centers that apply a very strict addiction model. But you're right. We need to get more people on board.
But we have people watching that live in Canada. So what part of Canada do you practice in? If somebody should...
We're in Toronto.
Wow.
Yeah, we're in Toronto, and we've actually seen people from BC. So because Canada has a national healthcare system and it's national, it doesn't matter where in Canada as long as they're Canadian.
Wow. So they could just come for free?
Well, no. Last year we did a pilot project, and the pilot was funded by a funder. Somebody donated for us, and we were able to actually see 80 people for free. This year, the money that we have was to design the program, but it's no longer funded because our national government, our national healthcare plan, won't acknowledge the condition, so it's not going to fund it.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to ask you next, is being a medical doctor. I've interviewed other medical doctors, even other psychiatrists, and a lot of them just do not believe in addiction in general or food addiction in particular. And I guess I would like to, I don't know what I can do as a layperson, but I would like to know how we can get some PR for this disease and make it, so, mainly because it will take, I think, the shame out of it. If some people said, oh, well, then pre-existing condition, but I think that if it was a real thing, people wouldn't feel so shame having it, because they blame themselves for their inability to control their insatiable appetite around these hyperpalatable foods.
I think that the only way that we're going to be able to do it, because it's not going to be a top-down process, like top-down meaning government and professionals. There is some science, definitely there's scientists and there's people focusing on that level. But by the time it becomes clinically applicable, we're going to be dead. We're going to be, it's not. What it needs to be is, on Facebook, people probably have seen there's all these, hi, I've got a depression, or hi, I've got anxiety, and it's okay. Like there's these sort of campaigns that are trying to normalize and destigmatize mental health. And I actually think this was probably funded by the drug industry. But aside from that, the effect of that is that people are much more willing to talk about their addictions. Pardon me, not their addictions, their mental health issues. And if we did the same thing with food addiction, I think that we would see the same thing. And we're starting to see it, like with Judy Collins' book, Craving. She talks very blatantly about her food addiction, and she calls it that. But we need more people like her coming out, so celebrities to come out and people on the social media to come out. Like you are, you're very open about this.
Oh yeah, and my book will be coming out soon, and I've talked about it very openly, at a medical conference, and it was, I'm not ashamed. I mean, that's the only way we can get this information out, because they say you're only as sick as your secrets, and like I said, I was thrilled to know it was a real thing, because then I didn't take it so personally that there was something wrong with me. I blame the food.
And let me just say one more thing. And when I've been interviewed by media who initially in the beginning of the interview will say, what do you mean by food addiction? By the end of the interview, they're saying to me, I get it now. And then when we hang up, they'll say to me, you know what, I think I might be one, or I think my wife is somebody. And so once we start talking about it and talk about it in a very open and non-shameful way, like you said, more and more people are going to say, yes, I think that's me. And if nothing else, that's what I want my book to be, is a vehicle of, in the way that it impacted you, that yes, this is a condition, and it's actually okay to talk about it. We're not weird. This is it.
Yeah. I mean, it's not any, it's like, would you be embarrassed to say you have eczema? It's like, oh my God, I have this rash on my arm. No, I mean, that's what I want it to be. I want it to be like that.
Yeah.
Do you anticipate, like you said, we'll all be dead by the time this becomes, but like, I mean, at some point you really think that they will embrace this as a real thing?
Unfortunately, I think the only way that will happen in any way quick is if we could market something, a drug or something. Right. And unfortunately, I mean, food addiction is what is that? It is just don't eat the toxic foods and then you're cured. Not cured, but managed.
Right. Well, yeah, manage. Exactly. That's the other thing. I think it's so interesting that people don't understand that obesity and food addiction, they're never cured. Because if you go back to eating the dietary style, whatever it is that caused you to be overweight or food addicted, it comes right back. It's sort of like saying, well, if you get out of rehab, you're not an alcoholic, but the minute you start drinking again, you are. And people don't. It's so interesting. Do you deal in your program at Renaissance like with families? Because what I find the hardest part of my job is that when I'm with the people, whether it's private consults or we have a conference, we have a weight loss conference. We call it the Ultimate Weight Loss Conference, but it's really a food addiction conference in Vegas every year. I can make an impact and they can follow the program. But the problem is they often, if they live alone, they usually do pretty well. But a lot of times they're married or they have children and they're not married. And the family members, maybe sometimes they're overweight, sometimes they're not. And I think that possibly that the family member is also food addicted but just doesn't know it. Yes. And it seems like these are the people that struggle the most because they can't clean. I don't want to say can't, but they're unwilling to clean up their environment because they don't want to cause any any conflict in the family. But I don't see the people recovering to the same degree when they live in a clean environment. So I guess my question is there a way that they can at least talk to their family members so that they could at least experience, if only for a few weeks, the benefit of what having a clean environment could do for their recovery?
Absolutely. So that's a crucial piece is to address the family. I mean, in terms of it's one of the tools is how do we deal with this? And what often happens is once the person's, that's why I say you put down the food, that's only the first thing. Then it's how are you going to not feel deprived and live a good life? Then it's how are you going to live with other people? And then we start having other issues coming up, like codependency issues. I can't tell so-and-so that I don't want their birthday cake. I can't. How am I going to do that? So we have to teach people tools and boundaries. And yes, it's part of our program is, what is the essence of our program if you stop eating the food? It's why it's not a diet. It's a lifestyle. And it involves tools with the family. And you're absolutely right. It's the kids, it's the husband, it's the parents who don't want to acknowledge this. So we suggest a continuing care program of some sort. Like, it's not just diet boot camp done off. This is an ongoing thing, and it's not just about me, it's about the social interaction.
That seems to be the hardest for people. The people that are more agreeable, that are more people pleasing, they seem to struggle and suffer a lot more. Do you think oh, go ahead, please.
I was going to say that was actually my issue. When I had my own struggles with food, I mean, I guess I could say I still do, but I'm in recovery, as it were.
Right.
And when I figured out, oh my God, because I was an addictions doctor, and I thought one day it was like my white light or whatever it was, the thing that cued me was to go, why don't I treat this as an addiction? Then I started to feel better. And the thing that happened is after a year or two, this happened a couple of times, it was the person that said, you've lost weight, you look fine, go ahead. And I couldn't say no. And it was that social piece. Even me, and I'm not that afraid of people. I'm pretty okay to say no. But when it comes to this, I just couldn't say no. It always comes at a weak moment, like I made you this Christmas cake. Come on, that kind of stuff. So I really get it. It's we are social animals, and it's very hard to say no in this context.
Absolutely. And I find that is the hardest piece. And I find that the more sweet and agreeable and people pleasing the person is, the more difficulty they have. And it's something that we practice and we have to learn. I remember
not people pleasers.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like people at one point, I'm sure they thought even people that drank alcohol that became alcoholics, that was a moral failure instead of a disease. I know that a long time ago, and maybe, I like to think of it like more like an allergy almost, because I happen to be allergic to black pepper and most legumes, and I don't beat myself up that I can't have these things, and I don't, and so if you look at sugar and flour sort of the same way, maybe one day it'll be like, I guess what I'm saying is, like in the 40s, all the movie stars smoked, and it was glamorous, right? They were glamorous for smoking. And then it became acceptable to smoke, but we knew it wasn't healthy. And now it's almost like you're a pariah if you smoke. They have, it's like people. Yeah. And so maybe sugar and flour. I mean, the thing is if there wasn't so much money to be made from sugar and flour like there was from alcohol, it might be easier to get this message across. But if everybody stopped eating sugar and flour today, a whole empire, a whole industry would just disappear, the processed food industry. But maybe my hope is that one day, just like with alcohol, while there's people that can drink and not be alcoholic, there are people that can eat sugar and flour and not be overweight or a food addict. But for most of us, I would say we have some sensitivity, and it will be just like no big deal. Just like, sugar, but right now it's like, no birthday cake, it's like, it's sugar and flour is in everything. And I find that one can be a gateway drug to the other. People will sometimes get the sugar, but to give up their bread, their French toast or their baguette, it's just, I find it so fascinating, and I wish I wasn't almost 60, because I'd like to go to medical school. I'd like to get a PhD in addictive nutrition, because to me it's the most fascinating thing of all, and I love what you're doing, and thank you for doing it. And one last question, because I know you have to go, but because I know you mentioned that at Renaissance you're working with end-stage people whose diet might have to be more rigid than somebody that isn't quite as vulnerable. But is it always a weighing and measuring program for the rest of your life, or?
That depends, because some people are what we would call volume addicted. So they're used to eating a lot, or they just want to have that feeling of eating. No, I don't think a person has to be weighing and measuring if they're earlier on. And they can eyeball it. Like, definitely portion control is important, and not eating throughout the day. Those are behaviors that they mean that you're not using other coping skills. Like, why do you eat a lot beyond normal hormonal satiation? It's because you're trying to deal with your stuff emotionally. That's not good. But if you're not doing that, I think eyeballing it and having general portion control is fine. But a lot of people have gone past that point and don't even know what it's like to feel hungry. Like, they just have no idea.
Absolutely.
And so it's either going to be that they're going to eat too much or not enough, or if they're not binging, they're going to restrict.
Right.
And this is not about a diet of restricting, because we see with our food people in the program, if they're eating, it's like, well, then if they're eating well and not binging, it's like, well, then let's maximize and eat very little. And we don't want to do that either.
Right.
So in that case, weighing and measuring becomes important. But again, it's part of that end stage continuum.
When you say people are volume addicted, like that just means, I mean, like.
Let me give you an example. Okay, so here's an example for myself, and it's in my book at the end. Before I do weigh and measure now, and as much as I feel uncomfortable about that, the overall peace of mind that I get is far greater than the feeling silly when I'm pulling out my scale. Mm-hmm. The peace of mind is much greater. But when I didn't have that peace of mind and I was eyeballing it, I discovered the nut butter. I don't know if you remember that at the very end.
I do.
But, I thought, and it's perfectly fine to have 1 teaspoon of nut butter, but that nut butter teaspoon became 3.
Yeah, and then a whole jar.
And then the whole jar, yeah. And that ability to eyeball, I lost my ability to eyeball, even though I thought that it was okay. Really, if I were to measure it, it wasn't okay. I think that when there's addiction, we call it cunning, baffling, and cunning and baffling. You are fighting you yourself, your smarts against you. And I often say with my addicts, which I'm one of, it's like playing chess against yourself, but the other person that you're playing, the addict that you're playing against is more motivated than you are because they're going to get the goods. You know what I'm saying? So I'm playing chess or some kind of a game of wits against myself, but the more motivated part of myself, the part of myself that wants that thing and is very determined to get it. So eyeballing it, I'm too vulnerable. And so my way of, I guess it's like a handicap if you're playing bowling or something. It's a way to add against that addict, which is just the smarter part of me.
Right.
The more cunning part of me.
Right. But are you familiar with the concept of calorie density, though? Like where, certain foods are lower in caloric density than other foods. Like, for example, that vegetables are 100 calories a pound versus oil, which is 4,000. And that the work of Dr. Rolls showed that if you keep your average calorie density to 567 calories per pound or less, most people, and again, we're not talking about food addicts, can eat pretty much ad libitum what they want until comfortably full. And that's what I follow. And because I'm traveling all the time, and I just, and like I said, my weight's been stable for 5 years now. I feel that if a tool helps somebody, they should do it. But some people have been driven crazy by the scale, by weighing and measuring, and because some of the programs were so restrictive that they weren't even getting enough food, and they were told that that if they ate 10 ounces of non-starchy vegetables instead of 7 ounces, they were out of integrity and they were kicked. Sometimes it just got to the point where it was just really, it's so I don't know. That would be maybe you could come back because I know you have to go. We could talk about that. Last question: are there other recovery activities you recommend? Like, I know for me, if I hadn't found exercise, I don't know if I could have, and I never exercised, by the way. Like literally, it was like I lost the weight, and then it's like, okay, now what? I don't want to go back to the food. And I know that for some people say like knitting, crafts. So what? Just a real quick recommendation. In addition to getting the right food plan for you, working on the emotional stuff, what other tools can we give people to help them recover?
Okay, so like exercise is a great one as long as you're not using it to maintain weight loss, because that's not a good way. But just generally speaking, I think it's a great idea. But okay, so other things like meditation.
Yes.
Social interaction is really important. If you're isolated, a lot of people who eat are socially isolated because you have to, once you put down your drug, you've been basically getting a saturation of dopamine and serotonin. Now you have to replace it with the real thing. And that means activities like, for example, exercise or I don't know, sports or something, but also social interaction. A lot of food gives you a serotonin kind of lazy, easygoing feeling. And you want to have that in another way, which is by hanging out with people. Not necessarily being, you can be an introvert, but and just do your 1 hour one-on-one with somebody. It doesn't have to be all the time. But you have to do something to replace that. Right. Otherwise it's called a dry drunk. Because you're just sitting there feeling deprived, right. And probably the food addict has not been doing stuff to nurture friendships and nurture interests and nurture, the last thing I would want somebody to go out on a track and run 30 minutes. No way, not at the beginning. You have to build up to it.
Sure.
But anyway, basically you have to, all of those neurochemicals that you've been eating excess amounts of were built for something else, normal life. Now you have to embrace normal life. And so a person like yourself or like myself encourages people to do that, not to go and just watch Netflix and sit there and wish they could eat their whatever it is.
I actually watch Netflix, but only if I'm exercising. So that's my little thing. You're really just so interesting and so delightful to talk to. Since our last talk, we talked about the stigma associated with the name food addiction, and so now I'm telling people that I suffer from triple D.
Yes, I saw that.
Dopamine deficiency disorder, because it sounds like a real thing, doesn't it?
I love it.
I promise I'm going to let you go in 1 second. I just want to say, with Christmas coming up,
I love that because it suggests that it's very easy to substitute.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter what it is.
Yeah.
And so
absolutely. I could exercise. I could have sex. I could do volunteer work. There's so many ways to raise that dopamine naturally. Yeah. So in a few days we have Christmas, which is a hard time for a lot of people, and I think for food addicts or any addicts in particular. Yeah. And there's a movie called It's a Wonderful Life that's going to be playing on television. One of my favorite movies. And in the movie, Clarence the Angel comes and shows George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart, what his life would have been like if what the world would have been like if he hadn't been born. And my wish for all food addicts out there that are suffering, that an angel could come around and just show them for one day what it would be like if they weren't addicted to food. Because I guarantee, like you and I who are recovering have recovered, if they could know, the slender body was a result of treating the food addiction. I never expected this. I wasn't going for that. But if they could just experience what it's like to live with the calm, stable brain and not addicted to the food, then they would also embrace what we know, that abstinence is bliss.
Absolutely. What was the term that you had the last time? I loved it. Mine is freedom tastes great, but you had a good one. Was it something delicious?
God. Well, I always say I make healthy taste delicious. That's my little motto.
That was it.
Yeah.
Healthy tastes delicious. I love it.
Absolutely, and that's what I do. And I am going to send you my book very soon. So I love that you have a cat, because I think pets are really a great way to get those feel-good neurotransmitters going. And so thank you so much for your time. Anytime you want to talk to me, whether it's live or taped, it would be an honor, a pleasure, and a privilege to talk to you. If you haven't read, or my preferred way, listened to Food Junkies, The Truth About Food Addiction by Dr. Vera Tarman, the only MD I've ever known that actually is a proponent for the disease of refined food addiction and a recovering addict herself, please buy that as soon as possible. So thank you so much, Dr. Tarman, and thanks all of you guys for watching another episode of Healthy Living. I'm Chef AJ, and I make healthy taste delicious without sugar or flour.